Welcome back to the channel, where we delve into real-life encounters and legal situations. Today, we're dissecting a traffic stop that rapidly transformed into a complex investigation involving suspected driving under the influence of drugs. This footage, captured from body cameras, offers a raw and unfiltered look at the interaction between a police officer and a driver named Bonnie. We will meticulously analyze the sequence of events, examining the officer's observations, the driver's responses, and the legal procedures that followed. Our goal is to provide a comprehensive understanding of this encounter, while emphasizing that all individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This video is intended for educational and informational purposes only. This case brings up many questions about officer discretion, the validity of field sobriety tests, and the rights of individuals during traffic stops. Let's get started. Initial traffic stop and officer's observations. The incident began with a routine traffic stop. The officer pulled over Bonnie's vehicle, which was towing a trailer. The stated reasons for the stop were a non-functioning brake light on the trailer's passenger side and observed driving irregularities. Specifically, the officer noted that Bonnie made a wide turn at an intersection, crossing into an adjacent lane. These initial observations were crucial, as they formed the basis for the officer's subsequent actions. A malfunctioning brake light was a clear safety hazard, and erratic driving could indicate impairment. The officer approached the vehicle and requested Bonnie's driver's license and insurance. This was standard procedure during a traffic stop. The officer's demeanor appeared calm and professional, aiming to establish a clear and respectful dialogue. While running Bonnie's information, the officer began to observe her behavior more closely. Upon returning the documents, the officer expressed concerns about Bonnie's demeanor, describing her as hyper. This subjective observation was the first indication of a potential impairment. Bonnie responded by stating that she had ADHD and OCD, and that she was often perceived as being under the influence even when she was not. This immediate explanation was significant, as it set the stage for a recurring theme throughout the encounter: the distinction between her typical behavior and potential impairment. This was a significant point of contention throughout the encounter. It's important to note that the officer's initial observations were largely subjective. Hyper is a broad term, and its interpretation can vary. This highlighted the inherent challenges in assessing impairment based solely on behavior. The officer had to decide whether these observations, combined with the traffic violations, warranted further investigation. The officer was trained to look for patterns of behavior that may indicate impairment, but the challenge lay in differentiating between genuine medical conditions and the effects of drugs or alcohol. Field sobriety tests, a detailed breakdown. Based on his observations, the officer decided to conduct field sobriety tests. This decision was critical, as it significantly escalated the encounter. The officer explained that he wanted to ensure Bonnie was safe to drive, emphasizing the importance of public safety. Bonnie agreed to the tests, but her frustration was evident. She repeatedly denied being under the influence of any substances, stressing that her behavior was typical. Before conducting the tests, the officer asked Bonnie if she had consumed any alcohol or taken any medications. She denied both, maintaining that she was not impaired. This was a standard question, but it was crucial for the officer to document her responses for legal purposes. The officer then conducted a pat-down search for weapons. This was a safety precaution, and it was a common practice during traffic stops, especially when further investigation was warranted. Ensuring officer safety was paramount, and this step was a routine part of the process. The officer began with the horizontal gaze nystagmus (HGN) test, which involved checking Bonnie's eye movements. This test was designed to detect involuntary eye movements that could be indicative of impairment. The officer instructed Bonnie to follow his finger with her eyes without moving her head. Bonnie mentioned having a lazy eye, which raised potential questions about the validity of the HGN test in her case. Pre-existing conditions could affect the results, and officers are trained to consider these factors. The officer had to determine whether Bonnie's eye movements were consistent with impairment or simply a result of her medical condition. The officer then instructed Bonnie on the walk and turn test. which assessed balance and coordination. He demonstrated the steps, emphasizing the importance of following instructions. Bonnie performed the test, but the officer observed some difficulties. This test required a high degree of concentration and coordination, and even slight deviations could be interpreted as signs of impairment. The officer was looking for specific indicators, such as stepping off the line or using arms for balance. The officer proceeded with the one-leg stand test, which further assessed balance and coordination. Bonnie was instructed to raise one leg and count out loud. Bonnie struggled to maintain her balance and eventually stopped the test. This test, like the walk and turn, required significant physical and mental focus. The officer was observing her ability to maintain balance and follow instructions simultaneously. Finally, the officer conducted the internal clock test, which involved Bonnie estimating the passage of 30 seconds with her eyes closed. This test assessed her sense of time, which could be affected by impairment. The officer noted the time difference, which he considered when making his final assessment. The officer was looking for a significant deviation from the actual time, which could indicate impairment. Arrest, resistance, and medical concerns. Based on his observations during the field sobriety tests and Bonnie's driving behavior, the officer decided to arrest her for operating a vehicle while intoxicated. This decision was a significant turning point in the encounter. The officer informed Bonnie of her arrest, and she vehemently denied being intoxicated and resisted arrest. She became increasingly agitated, expressing her frustration and demanding a breathalyzer test. Bonnie's resistance to arrest led to a tense and chaotic situation. The officer attempted to restrain her, and she continued to protest her innocence. She expressed concern for her dogs at home, adding to her distress. She also repeatedly claimed that she passed all the tests, highlighting her disagreement with the officer's assessment. The officer was now faced with the challenge of managing a resisting suspect while ensuring her safety. During the arrest, Bonnie requested her inhaler, indicating that she was experiencing breathing difficulties. The officer called for an ambulance to address her medical needs. The arrival of paramedics added another layer of complexity to the situation. They assessed Bonnie's condition and provided medical assistance. The officer had to balance the need to enforce the law with the need to ensure Bonnie's well-being. Hospital, blood draw, and legal procedures. The officers transported Bonnie to the hospital for a blood draw. This was a crucial step in the investigation, as a blood test could provide definitive evidence of impairment. Bonnie continued to demand a breathalyzer test, but the officers explained that they were primarily concerned about the presence of drugs. This highlighted the difference between alcohol and drug testing procedures. The officers explained the process of obtaining a warrant for a blood draw. This was a legal requirement, as a blood test was considered an invasive procedure. They explained the form that was read to her that she said she didn't understand. Bonnie expressed confusion and frustration, maintaining that she passed the field sobriety tests. This demonstrated her lack of understanding of the legal process and the officer's reasoning. The officers were now navigating the complexities of obtaining a warrant while managing Bonnie's distress. After obtaining the warrant, the officers proceeded with the blood draw. Bonnie was then transported to jail, where she would await further legal proceedings. The legal process now took over, and Bonnie's fate would be determined in a court of law. Post-arrest information and analysis. The blood test results revealed that Bonnie tested positive for methamphetamine and amphetamine. This provided concrete evidence of drug use, which supported the officer's decision to arrest her. Bonnie was charged with resisting arrest, operating a vehicle while intoxicated, and a probation hold. These charges reflected the severity of the situation and the legal consequences of her actions. It's crucial to remember that Bonnie is innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. The legal process will determine her guilt or innocence, and she has the right to a fair trial. This case raises important questions about law enforcement procedures, individual rights, and the challenges of assessing impairment. It highlights the complexities of real-life encounters and the need for careful analysis and understanding. The legal system had to balance the rights of the individual with the need to ensure public safety. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. Leave your comments below and let us know your thoughts on this case. Your insights spark crucial discussions about law enforcement and individual rights.